Please welcome Joanne.
Thanks so much. So I wanted to just start with just issuing some thanks to folks around this room who I think have been instrumental in bringing together an extraordinary coalition of states that I think is discussing exactly the right things in order to help make sure that our students are really starting college ready for the challenges ahead and exiting high school ready for college and ready for the workplace. So let me start by thanking Mike Cohn for Achieve's leadership of this extraordinary coalition of states, and also Achieve board members Craig Barrett, who's the chairman of Intel and we heard from this morning, and Governor Bredesen of Tennessee, who are so committed to improving our nation's education system that they've made education a real priority in the work that they do and have taken the time to be with us here today. Also, I want to acknowledge Governor Pawlenty of Minnesota and the other governors and business leaders on Achieve's board for the commitment that they've shown and for their leadership in this work. Personally, I'd also like to add that I'm really thrilled that I'm going to be able to work more frequently over the next few years with many of you. I look forward to learning from you and learning with you. As you're leading the work on the ground, I'm really hoping that the department quickly learns how we can best support you in that work, and through cross-state convenings like this one, really help accelerate everyone's learning and progress. I want to start also by thanking you for the leadership that you've shown over the past 5+ years as the American Diploma Project got started. ADP has been really instrumental in paving the way for a lot of the reforms that really are at the heart of our national discussion on education reform, and are key to the President's and the Secretary's education agendas. Preparing students to graduate from high school ready for college and ready for the workplace, it's core to what we're all trying to do. I think you might know that the President has set 2 goals that are completely aligned with the work that all of you have been doing. First, by 2020, he wants America to reclaim its position as #1 in the world in the percent of students, in the percent of the population that has a college degree. Second, he wants every American to have at least 1 year of post-secondary education, which I think is a real reflection of our commitment to reducing the gaps in high school graduation and college access and success. These goals are a reflection of a really deep and fundamental belief, a belief that I know all of us share, or we wouldn't be doing the work we do, that education is the key to creating a healthy economy, to ensuring a thriving democracy, and to enabling our children to lead productive and fulfilling lives. In today's workplace, and certainly in tomorrow's, we know that we have to graduate students who are much better prepared for the demands that are going to face them. But I know I'm preaching to the choir here, so let me turn instead to the place where the rubber and the road meet, because it's our jobs, I think each of our jobs over the coming months and years, to really figure out what solutions we need to implement, what policies and what practices are going to have the biggest positive impact on student outcomes, and then to execute our pieces of those extraordinarily well. So that's where I come back to ADP and the role that you've played in laying the foundation for the work that we're all engaged in today. And I mean this very seriously. All of you for a long time have recognized that in order to provide our kids with the knowledge and the skills that they need to compete in the global economy of tomorrow, we have to prepare them better today. We need to know what it means to be college and career ready. How do we define it? What does it look like? How will we know when our kids have achieved this goal? How can we tell if our students are on the path toward that goal all along the way? And if they're not, what can we do to get each and every one of them back on track? These are the questions that I think you've been asking and debating for quite a long time, and they form the basis for a lot of the reforms in which we're now engaged. The education reform community has essentially been undertaking what I actually have been thinking of as a big backwards mapping exercise to define the standards, to put in place the people, the practices, the supports, and the infrastructure that we're going to need in order to help prepare our students for success in college and the workforce. Now, I know even as we sense a real optimism, and I felt it this morning as you were all talking about the Common Core standards, even as we sense a real optimism that we may be able to unite around a common set of college and career-ready standards, that this crucial first step maybe isn't a pipe dream anymore. We're still plagued by a history of similar failed endeavors and a legacy of high hopes that have been dashed. But from where I'm standing, there are three things that feel very different this time. You, all those of you who have been part of ADP for a while, as well as others who maybe are newer to this network, you're among the leaders of this critical movement, and I'm guessing that you see things even more clearly than we in Washington do. But here's what it looks like from where we're standing. First, we see a coalition of states that's growing, up to 48 now, I guess, from this morning's count. And the reality of preparing our children to compete, not just with kids who live down the block or across town, but with those who live in other states and in other countries, with students in Singapore or China or India or Denmark, the task is daunting. But if states are doing it together, using the same standards and measuring sticks, we'll be able to do it better if we can galvanize all of our nation's resources, our teachers, our school and district leaders, as well as academics, curriculum and test publishers, technology developers, researchers. If all of these resources really can be mobilized to focus around the same high goals and the same standards, I think the country can get there this time. Second, those of us who are on the outside watching with really great hope as the states come together to develop common standards, we're delighted to see everybody clinging tenaciously to a high bar, to high standards, to really high expectations for our kids. During the public comment period for Race to the Top, the concern many of you voiced was, what if the proposed common standards aren't high enough? I think Eric Smith even said the same thing this morning when he was talking to you. That's exactly the right concern to have. And the good news is, many of you, most of you, maybe all of you are at the table in these conversations. And with so many of you clearly focused on the issue and working to ensure that the standards really do prepare kids for success in college and the workplace, we're optimistic that this time we'll really be able to succeed. The third reason, and this one is obvious but clearly different from other efforts, is that we have funding to help this time. So Rahm Emanuel has this saying, never let a good crisis go to waste. And we're certainly turning this economic crisis into a gift for our children and for the future of the economy by using this portion of the stimulus funds through Race to the Top to help states build out the assessments, the tools, the materials, the professional development that are needed to implement and measure our students' college and career readiness. So how does all of this fit into the administration's agenda and into Race to the Top? Well, standards and assessment, as you could probably see from the notices that we released in July, are at the core of the agenda. Common career and college-ready standards and the assessments that measure them, these are the bedrock on which the rest of the reforms really are built. Sitting on top of that foundation, we need great teachers and great school leaders. You'll see a big emphasis on this in Race to the Top. If the standards tell us what matters, the teachers and the principals are the ones who translate that into instruction, who guide our students' learning. So our entire human capital agenda is really built around these two facts. First, that great teaching matters, and second, that great teaching happens more consistently in schools led by great principals. Now, I know the department is being accused of being all about testing to measure teachers, but I want to go back to first principles and say this again. What we're really trying to say is that great teaching matters and great leadership matters. So the policies that we're putting out there, we think focus very simply on the four core things that support this. First, on recognizing who's good. That is, whose students are growing, whose students are making good academic success. It's that first step to what Craig Barrett called this morning 12 good teachers in a row. Second, we focused on developing, rewarding, and retaining effective teachers and principals. Third, we want to recruit great new entrants into this field and prepare them well for success. Again, I think it was noted this morning, if I heard correctly from the back of the room, where admittedly it was a little hard to hear, that there was some desire to kill off teachers' colleges. We do think it's important to do a better and perhaps different job of preparing new recruits for this profession than has been done in the past. And finally, we want to ensure that the best teachers and principals are working in the schools and with the students who need them the most. The third part of the agenda is about data. And to guide students' learning, educators need good information about what students know and can do. And they need it available at their fingertips so that they can adjust and differentiate the instruction appropriately. I think you know that a lot of the administration's reforms in the past administration and to date have focused on state longitudinal data systems. Race to the Top does have a component of that, but it's also very focused on data systems that we're calling instructional improvement systems. So solutions that are designed for at the local level for teachers, for principals, for administrators, to help them know what's working, what's not, and for whom, so that they can adjust their instruction real time to meet the needs of their kids. When it's coupled with strong professional development and a school-wide culture of continuous improvement, data is an incredibly powerful lever for change. Fourth and finally, I think we all know that we've got a moral obligation to turn around the persistently performing schools. No system is stronger than its weakest link, and we have to focus special and particular attention on the neediest of the kids that we're serving. We have to make sure they have the best. Not sure why I'm kind of cutting in and out here, sorry about that. We have to make sure that they have the best of the best, because when you're far behind, you need support the most. So these students really need us to make sure that they're getting access to the best teachers, the best principals, running the best and the most effective schools, and they need it urgently. Race to the Top embodies this agenda. It asserts that all four of these reforms together have to be tackled, that in fact, it's the thoughtful design and interplay of these four reforms that will lead to sustained and lasting instructional improvement in classrooms, in schools, and in districts, and that will lead to higher achievement and attainment for our students. Education, we know, is a complex system, and each area interacts with the others. If we don't get these key building blocks right, the structure we build won't stand, and it certainly won't withstand the inertia that we know stalls most education reforms. So now, as you know, Race to the Top is constructed differently from most of the education grant programs you've seen come out of the department before. It provides over $4 billion in funding to incent and support this kind of serious, coherent, and comprehensive reform. The keys to success here, we think, are going to be good ideas and plans, conditions conducive to reform, demonstrated political will, and the capacity to execute. Race to the Top is really structured to ask applicants four overarching questions. First, in each of the four reform areas, what legal and policy conditions has each state created already that are conducive to education reform and innovation? Second, for each of the four reform areas, what plans does the state propose implementing over the next 4 years that it believes will lead to the most dramatic improvements in student outcomes? How do these plans build on and connect to the state's existing efforts and assets? I want to just sort of hark back to something I think Matt said at the beginning. I don't think what we're looking for here is brand new efforts that come out of left field and aren't on your agenda and the things you're trying to do. We're trying to provide flexible funding to really support your ability to build on the great things that are happening in the districts or at the state levels or in schools or in charter schools in your state, and really figure out how to identify those practices, replicate them, disseminate them, and where applicable, take them statewide. So how will states ensure, the third question, how are states going to ensure that they and their LEAs can really execute against these plans? So this is about capacity building. It's about having the leadership and the teams, the support plans, and the operational infrastructure that are needed to successfully deliver on the proposed plans. And then there's the culminating question, what's the impact on student outcomes, statewide, that the plans are going to have? In the end, it's all got to be in the service of increasing student achievement, increasing high school graduation rates, narrowing the achievement gaps, and making sure our students are prepared for success in college and the workplace. So I want to spend a couple of minutes on some specific questions that we've heard about Race to the Top. Before I do need to tell you that we are, despite the fact that I'm up here talking away, we're in a quiet period right now, which is the period after public comment has ended and before we've released the final notices. So I am limited in some of the questions I can answer and the things I can say. And we'll get to the questions in a few minutes, but let me just tell you a couple of at least logistic and clarifying questions that I've heard that I can respond to right now. First, let me talk about timeline and public comments. So I think you know that we released the proposed priorities and criteria in late July and had a 30-day public comment period that closed at the end of August. So during that month, I thought 1,200 was a lot until I heard 12,000. So we received 1,200 comments from all over the country. And I want to say that probably the average length of the comments was 5 or 6 pages, some topping out at around 50 or more. So these were not trivial little sentences that we received. These were deep and thoughtful comments. Somebody asked if we got a ton of comments, and the answer might be very literally, if you printed them all out, that we in fact did get a ton of comments. And I think most of the people in this room probably submitted comments, and I want to thank you for that. We got comments from people all over the country, from the chiefs and the governors, and from state legislators and members of Congress. We got them from unions. We got them from all kinds of teachers across all different subject areas. We got a lot from parents. We got them from superintendents. And we got them from education associations, nonprofits, and community-based organizations representing literally dozens of different constituencies. What was most notable to me, and I did in fact read them all as of Sunday night, was their passion, their interest in education, their diversity, and the clarity and authenticity of the voices. One of the things that's hard when you're designing a program like this is that because it affects the whole country, almost everybody in the country is an interested party, and you have to sit within your 4 walls and try to design a program that you think best embodies the kind of education reform efforts that we're all looking to implement. And the public comment period was actually quite a gift to me in being able to hear the actual voices responding to the things that we'd put out there in a way that I felt was very actionable. The comments are all posted publicly on regulations.gov, so I do urge you to sample a few. It's an interesting read, although probably you don't need to read all 1,200 of them. But so the process that we're involved in right now is reviewing those comments to inform the changes that we're going to make to the notice before we release the final application package later this fall. We've proposed, as you know, that states have 2 opportunities to apply. States that are ready to apply now can do so this winter as part of Phase 1. They'll have 60 days to finalize their proposals from the time we release the final notice. States that need more time will have until spring of 2010 to apply. That's Phase 2. States that apply in Phase 1 and don't win can certainly reapply in Phase 2, and they'll actually get a lot of feedback on their proposals that might be of help to them. Phase 1 winners receive full-sized awards, so they don't need to reapply in Phase 2. They're off and running as soon as they win. Phase 1 winners, we hope, will be announced, it'll certainly in the first half of 2010, but hopefully toward the beginning of that first half of 2010. And Phase 2 winners will be announced by September of 2010. One other thing I just want to clarify, because it's been a big question, is that the money for this program is spent over 4 years. In the application, I think you saw, in the proposed notice, I think you saw that we are asking states to think about their plan through through the 13-14 school year. And that's because even though we have to obligate the funds by September, you have 4 years to spend them down. So next, LEA participation. We heard very clearly from the comments that we need to clarify this area quite a bit before we release them in the final notice, and we do promise to do that. Let me just tell you a couple of things that I can say now. When a state wins, it has to pass 50% of the funds through to participating LEAs via the Title I formula. Those funds, however, are used by the LEAs in a manner that's consistent with the state's Race to the Top proposal, not in Title I prescribed ways. The state's Race to the Top, the other 50% of the funds that the state gets can be used at the state level and or pass through to any districts in any way that you want to, as long as it's consistent with the proposal that you've submitted to us. So now let's talk about how states determine which LEAs participate. To be eligible to participate in a state's Race to the Top proposal, a district does have to explicitly agree to implementing the plans in the proposal. We've suggested that states and participating LEAs sign formal agreements like MOUs outlining their roles, responsibilities, and agreed upon plans. We did receive a lot of comments and suggestions on this topic, and we're working hard to clarify in the final notice more of the specifics about how LEAs will participate and how they'll demonstrate commitment to their state's plans. Next topic is budgets. We do plan to include some budget guidance in our final application notice. We'll be proposing budget ranges that are fairly wide, and they're based roughly on state student populations. However, we do expect this budget guidance to be non-binding. That is, states are encouraged to develop budgets that match the needs of your specific proposals, even if these come in above or below the ranges that we've specified. The beauty of this funding is it was given flexibly to the department, and we want to provide it flexibly to the states. So it's very flexible funding without many strings attached at all. As long as it's tied clearly to the goals that you've outlined in your proposal, it's pretty much a valid use of the funds. So finally, let me tell you a little bit about how the competition itself is going to work. All of the judging is going to be done by external peer reviewers. We're working to assemble panels of our nation's most distinguished educators, policymakers, and academics to participate in the review process. I don't know whether you have seen this, but the Secretary did put out a public call for nominations. You'll find it on the front page of our website at ed.gov. If any of you know strong candidates, though I would guess that no one in this room is eligible to put their name in, but if you do know strong candidates, please feel free to send them our way. All of the information about how to nominate people is in the open letter from the Secretary on our website, and the deadline for nominations is the end of this month, September 30th, so please do act quickly if you know people who you think would be terrific reviewers. We will explain in the final notice how the competition itself will be structured and run. And because the competition is so large and because it's so critical to the department, that it's crystal clear that this is about education, not about politics, we really do plan an unprecedented level of transparency in the competition. So this means that we will be publishing at a minimum the point values for each criterion. We'll also be exploring other avenues like posting applications online together with the comments and points received. We're working hard to operate this in a very transparent way, and any suggestions that any of you might have for how we can do this even better, we would welcome. In fact, some of the best ideas we've already gotten came in through the public comments process, but we're really open to hearing any other ideas you might have about how we can be more forthcoming on this. We're also currently planning to hold a bidders conference once the final notice is released to support states as they apply, and we'll publish more on that as we get closer to the date. So let me turn back for a moment to some additional comments that we heard. Since releasing the proposed notice, we've been criticized for being overly prescriptive, and we've also been asked to be much more specific. So first on this prescriptiveness front, I'll be the first to admit that the legal templates and frameworks that the department uses to express its policies are not the optimal vehicles for communicating a vision. So I think what we end up publishing kind of looks like a list. I hope, though, that if you review each of the core reform areas, what you'll see is that we're asking applicants to describe their approaches to addressing the large levers for change. So whether it's figuring out how to put data in the hands of your teachers or developing an HR framework for teachers and principals that's anchored in how their students are performing, or stepping up with an urgency to addressing our persistently lowest performing schools, we're really asking for your ideas and your plans for how we can get all of our students ready by the time they graduate high school for college and the workplace. So I want to throw one challenge back at you. We've put forward key areas for reform, areas that we think are critical to significantly improving education in our country. And what we're really asking is how you would like to handle these. Race to the Top really does allow states tremendous freedom and flexibility to describe your big picture theory of change and your correlated agenda for reform. It then asks you how you're going to embody that in an actionable plan, how you'll execute the plan, and how the work you do under the plan will lead to increased student outcomes statewide. Finally, it asks you to tell us how much it will cost to fund it. So, contrary to the criticism that we're being too prescriptive, we did also receive a lot of comments from states asking us, as I said, to be more specific. States asked us to tell them if they could do this or how to do that. Now, I understand that when we put something out that looks a little bit like a laundry list, because that's how our frameworks work, we get back comments that ask what you need to do to comply with our lists, because that's how you've always had to do business with us. So I do want to say that not only the states, but certainly also the department needs to move out of our comfort zone and break some of our old habits and behaviors in order for all of this to work and for all of us to help each other really achieve the goals that we've set out. But I do encourage you, as you're putting your applications together, to really color outside the lines and think differently. Don't assume that there's a right answer to this or there's something that you think we want to hear and parrot it back to us. And don't assume that any counterproductive constraints under which you're currently operating are unchangeable. Our intent through Race to the Top is really to provide a significant amount of funding to support the most promising reform plans in the country for the states that have the best shot at executing these plans well. I think the Secretary has repeatedly said that the best ideas come from schools and districts and states, not from Washington. We're really looking for states to lead the way here. The winners of Race to the Top are going to be the leaders of the education reform movement for the country, and we're counting on them, and I think our kids are counting on them, on all of you, to really help show us the way.